I'll find myself wanting to please the crowd. I'll find myself wanting to please the crowd. I'll need you to remind me that I should obey God. That I should obey God. I'll act like I don't have any problems.
I'll need you to show me how to share my struggles with others.
I want to have a lot of money so I can buy what I want. I'll need you to teach me that my things belong to God.
That my things belong to God.
I'll struggle with my looks and appearance.
I'll need you to remind me that God wonderfully made me.
I'll tend to think about myself before others.
I'll need you to teach me that the last will become first. The last will become first.
The last will become first.
I'll think I'm a lot smarter than I actually am.
I'll think I'm a lot smarter than I actually am.
I'll need you to show me how to learn from God's wisdom.
I'll want to avoid hard conversations.
I'll want to avoid hard conversations.
I'll need you to show me how to speak the truth
In love.
in love.
I'll look for happiness in many different places.
I'll need you to show me that joy is
Found in following Christ.
I'll find myself stuck in bad habits.
I'll need you to show me the way out. I'll need you to show me the way out.
I'll need you.
I'll need you. I'll need you. I'll need you to point me toward Christ when no one else will.
To point me toward Christ when no one else will.
I'd like us to start with the word of the Lord from Colossians, chapter 3, verse 1. If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things that are above, not on things that are on the earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. And when Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. The will of God, the call of Christ, the work of the Spirit, and the mission of the church is to proclaim this message: let us be raised with Christ. Yes, of course, we mean that. When we mean, may everybody that is in this auditorium, may everyone within earshot of this message, so embrace the call of Christ to grow in sanctification, expressed in a way that is most dramatically visible in our entrance moment of baptism. But it's also the goal of every Christian home that our children will be raised with Christ, that they'll experience him in their youth, that they will live with him at home, that they will grow in him as they get older. And this involves 3 points. The first is that children are actually raised. That's upward and outward motion. The second is that our children will experience Christ in their upward and outward growth. I'm going to talk about both of those points. And then I'm going to conclude with a third one. I want to address the unmistakable difference between a secular view of successful parenting versus modeling Christ to our kids, because those two are easily misunderstood. So, 3 points for this morning. First, the goal of every Christian home is that our children experience raising up. In the letter to the Ephesians, Paul says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." Did you catch those 3 words? It's in virtually every translation. Bring them up. I wish you'd circle that word up. The goal of parenting is to raise up children, not to keep them dependent, but to raise them up. It's possible to raise our children with a giant thumb pressing down on their heads. You can't beat Mother Nature and time. Our children will get older. They will grow in stature. They will even grow in knowledge. but we can keep them from developing wisdom. We can keep them from growing in favor with God. Out of our own selfishness, we can wish for them to stay little too long. We can wish for them to be our little projects, our best friends, catering to our wishes. But children are not ours. They are on loan from God. We're called from the time that they're born to consider how we can develop them, to make decisions for themselves, to choose character on their own, to discern wisdom and prudence, issues that you and I have never even experienced. It's not a coincidence that the apostle contrasts raising them up with provoking children to wrath or anger. It's possible to so beat them down that they never grow up. We can do that with violent force, of course. You don't need me to point that out. Parents who so abuse their kids that they develop a Stockholm-like response, ever surrendering their own judgment to their parents. But we can also do it spiritually. We can expect our children to live by spiritual rules rather than developing their own Christian relationship with Christ, one that might go beyond your list or mine. We're called to teach them how to choose Christ for themselves. If we don't raise our children up, they become bitter, angry people. Authoritative parenting needs to be re-examined. The only kind of authority the Bible recognizes is a servant-like authority. We are teachers, we are modelers, we are guides, we are not God. And our children do not belong to us. They belong to God. As teachers and as guides, we are not taskmasters. We walk ahead and we show by our lives what it means to choose Christ for ourselves, to walk the way of Christ on our own each and every day. And that's how they learn. That's how they learn to choose Christ for themselves. It's possible to raise our children but not raise them up. We can raise them to keep them dependent in at least two ways. On the one hand, we can abdicate our role and not raise them at all. Too much training without instruction, or too much instruction without training. These are ways that we can fail to raise them up. So it's worth asking, am I raising my children? Am I raising them down? Am I holding on so tight that I'm raising them inward? Or am I raising them up? Second, we're not only called to raise them up, we're supposed to ensure that they're raised with Christ. Remember on one occasion, Elisha heard about a problem that the king of Israel couldn't figure out. Being a prophet, he sends a message to the king of Israel and says, if you can't figure this out, send the people you're trying to work with to me. And at least they will know for sure that there's a prophet in Israel. It reminds me similar, parallel sense, to that wonderful story, that quote that many of us have needle pointed on pillows or on the wall at our house. It's in most Thomas Kincaid pictures. Joshua is standing there in front of all the people and he says, choose you this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. The idea being, look, my kids may one day choose a very different life than the one I'm modeling. But as long as they're under my roof, what they will see and hear and know is Jesus Christ. It's a good line, and it's a good message, but it's so easily misunderstood. What do you think it means for Christ to be the center of our family life? it may not be what you think. Randy Harris is a friend and a teacher out in Texas, and he was a roommate with Larry Bankston years ago. I just found that out recently. Randy tells a great story, a true story. He says that one of his students came to him and said, "I've got a Bible study set up, and I would like you to go with me because I haven't done this very much." Sounded like a great opportunity to mentor. So Randy's in the car with his student. They go to this house. They're about to get out, and the student grabs Randy's knee and says, "I need to tell you something first." That's never good. He says, "Now, I want you to know, this is a couple. The wife is all on board. The husband is hostile. He does not want us here." Great. So they go in the front door, and hostile is not the word for it. She is sitting there, and they begin a study, and he is coming in and out from the back room saying the most unkind things, yelling expletives, "Can't believe you're in my home. Did she put you up to this?" All that kind of stuff. They finish the study, and she says, "Would you come back next week?" Randy's thinking, and the student says, "Of course we will." They come back next week, do the same thing. Every week they do this, the man moves from the back bedroom to the hallway, to the other side of the couch, eventually right next to his wife, and he starts to get it. He starts seeing the call of Christ, and you can see the call of Christ grabbing a hold of his heart. And he's so excited about what the next step is, and says, "I see that Jesus is calling for me to surrender everything I am. So what and how do I do that?" And all of a sudden, the Bible study got called off by the wife. She thanked them for coming, but said, "I think that's quite enough," and asked them to leave, please, now. And Randy says, "I can't believe I didn't see it until that moment." What he was hearing is the call to surrender everything so that Christ is all in all. What she wanted was just enough religion to fill out an already full plate. And a call like that is too crowded. I want you to think about what it means for Christ to be the center of our family. When you think about parenting, what do you consider to be your aim? I have been so challenged, humbled, moved, reading for this series, by an interesting phrase, and I first saw it in an article online, in a blog, but I've seen it in other books too, called "the idolatry of good things." And the article went on to say, it is very easy to see the temptation of bad things. Very easy, right? What we think sometimes is the way we get tempted is Satan comes to the front door holding something that says on the front of it, like a Wile E. Coyote, a big bag that says really bad things that will harm you in your life, and wants to hand it to you, and it burns your fingers when you hold it. That's not the way it works. It's through the back door. It's things that seem good in themselves. Sometimes it's even things God has commanded, but not according to his time, not according to his way, and to take the place of even more primary things. Those are the sneaky ones. I want to think about some things that are good in themselves, can be very good in themselves. Let's think about sports. I hope I make it out of here. Sports teach wonderful skills. Depriving our kids of free play is bad for them. That's an extreme. That's why I love sports. But so is trying to live vicariously through our children, reliving our failed dreams. That deep desire that your kids will become famous, that if you drive them to seek unrealistic expectations because you never quite got to play varsity in that high school team, so your kid sure will, can breed anxiety in kids. Parents who see coaching as a really good thing. I see coaching as a really good thing. My dad was my baseball coach. My brother is the coach of his kids. Coaching is a good thing. But I'm talking about those who just have to be in control. Because it's not really about the kids. It's about me. Coaching is good. It can be helpful. Sports are good. It can be encouraging. But when I see our children as an extension of ourselves and the game we're playing as so important, our kids see our passion in that far exceeding our passion in spiritual things. What do they learn? And when it comes time to choose, and it always comes time to choose, between spiritual things and the ball field, just look in the mirror or your daily scheduler and ask, what comes first? That dance team, the cheer team, the debate team, the quiz bowl. And now all the homeschooling, camp directing, Wednesday night attending parents are saying, let them have it. Well, let me throw you a curveball. Now let's see if I can make it out the other door. How about that Bible bowl? How about that convention? How about those Christian camps? How about the real reason why we chose to school the way we did? There are a number of things that are good in themselves. But you know what can easily become an alternate religion to Christianity? Christianish environments to do our work for us. Do you know what can also be an extension of ourselves, giving our kids unrealistic expectations to play out a role in front of others? Using religious things to force a drama of performance. Expecting high returns, creating high demands, living vicariously through our children, chasing after recognition and achievement. It's as worldly as it gets, and I've seen it everywhere. In the early 1900s, David Lipscomb compiled some notes on the book of Ephesians. He later expanded it into a commentary. Here's what he said about Ephesians 6:4. Raise them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Now, he wrote this in 1917. In no point do Christians fail more than in the training of their children in the Lord. They allow them to grow up ambitious of worldly preferment, lovers of pleasure, greedy of gain. The obedience of childhood and youth rendered to a wise Christian rule forms the habit of self-control, self-respect, diligence, faithfulness, and kindliness of heart, which are the best guarantees for happiness and success in life. You are not your own. Your children are not your own. Your plans for them are not the goal. God has given us His children to raise up towards Him as we help them develop a relationship with Him, especially as they see it played out in us. Raised with Christ, not raised with words about Christ per se, not church attendance per se, not Bible awards per se, but authenticity. We can so easily buy into the exile motif, burning books, closing them off from anything different to ensure that they're raised in a Christianish environment. But I'm telling you, being raised with Christ is so much more personal and cannot be substituted with anything else but Him. And He's a person. It means showing our children authentic, sacrificial love. Husbands and wives who talk to each other like they really love each other. Parents who pray from the heart, not because they read in a book that it's really good for their kids to see them pray. Mothers and fathers that are genuinely excited about the love and mercy of Jesus Christ and show it daily in their life. Those who show it to everyone around them. Just ask the neighbors. Those who are good sportsmen because they live by the fruit of the Spirit on the field. Just ask anyone at the field. Good working parents who don't assume the worst about their neighbors, who live as if life that they now live by the flesh, they live by the faith of the Son of God who loved them and gave himself for them. People who seem to think that whatever happens in this life is not nearly as important as living out the story of selfless surrender and abiding in the peace of Christ. And when we fail, and we will fail, do we model real sorrow? Seek real forgiveness? Do our children see Christ in us? Not Christian light, not Christianish, not Christian stuff. Do they see Christ in us? It's pretty incredible. You and I, parents, we get to be Christ to our children. Christ to our children. And what is it that we love most about Christ? We love that Christ carved out an hour of each day to listen to us tell him stories. More than that, right? That he attended a wedding every now and then. It's more than that, right? What we love about Christ is that he gave himself up for us. Tim Keller once made a remarkable line. All true love is sacrificial love. And he got that, of course, from the Bible. The word of the Lord to the Hebrews. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. I don't know about your house, but my house includes what feels like hundreds of tiny, sharp toys strewn out along the hallway from my room to the bathroom every midnight. The cry is for milk 3 or 4 times a night. The constant need for my attention. And in my mind, I say to myself, I need a break. I don't like all these aspects of my life. I have important things to do. But then if we stop and truly listen to that still small voice speaking to us, we get to be Jesus to our children, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame. Neil Lightfoot wrote a commentary on Hebrews. And he says, think about what Jesus faced. He was violently opposed. I read that line. His sayings were twisted. I read that one. His claims were ridiculed. I read all 3 of those and I thought, wow, Jesus had a 3-year-old too. All true love is sacrificial love. We pour ourselves out for, give or take a week, about 20 years. But then and only then will our children know, truly know, what it means that Jesus poured himself out for us. What it means that our Father is the good shepherd who lays down his life for his sheep. Our children come to know that a world that they come into completely dependent, they can grow out of complete dependence and come into their own independence when we give up our time, when we give up our goals, when we give up our dreams, yes, including our vicarious dreams that we had for our children before we got to know them. When we give up our wills and our wishes and our desires to be anything but truly present in a sacrificial way, then our dependent children can experience the safe and trustworthy environment in which to grow independent and self-sufficient. Listen to these words from a fellow preacher. When you have children, they're in a state of dependency. They have so many needs. They can't stand on their own. And they'll not just grow out of their dependency automatically. The only way your children will grow beyond their dependency into self-sufficient adults is for you to essentially abandon your own independence for 20 years. When they're young, for example, you've got to read to them and read to them. Otherwise, they won't develop intellectually. Lots of their books will be boring to you. And you have to listen to your children. Keep listening as they say all kinds of things that make for less than scintillating conversation. And then there's dressing, bathing, feeding, and teaching them to do these things for themselves. Furthermore, children need about 5 compliments for every criticism they hear. And unless you sacrifice much of your freedom and a good bit of your time, your children will not grow up healthy and equipped to function. Unfortunately, there are plenty of parents who just won't do it. They won't disrupt their lives that much. They won't pour themselves into their children. They won't make the sacrifice. And their kids grow up physically, but they're still children emotionally, needy, vulnerable, dependent. Think about it this way. You can make the sacrifice, or they're going to make the sacrifice. It's them or you. Either you suffer temporarily and in a redemptive way, or they're going to suffer tragically and in a destructive way. It's at least partly up to us. All real, life-changing love is substitutionary sacrifice. We're called to look to Jesus, who is the perfecter of all faith. Surely that also means how we parent. You see, there are 3 wrong views as we close, and 1 right view about what it means to parent like Christ. One wrong view is parenting with power. Christ is king, and I'm supposed to be like him, so I'm going to run my house like it's my kingdom. My family is an extension of myself, so that's why I want to have a family. I always wanted to be the envy of my neighborhood. 3.5 children, 2.5 dogs, I've got it made. This is parenting with no personal cross. A second wrong view is sacrificing for selfish return. Sacrificing for my own needs through my children. Working that second job so that I can buy them the newest iPhone or that $50,000 brand new car for their 16th birthday. Boy, do I sacrifice. Yes, but for what end? So that my kids can learn to think that the world caters to their selfish wants. This is parenting without shame to despise. A third wrong view is sacrificing with anything but joy. It's the view of let's work through these math problems together until you completely understand them, even though I'd rather be watching the Super Bowl right now, kind of sacrifice. That's parenting with no joy. There is a different way. It's a hard way. It seems so beyond us, and yet it has to be because it's the story of parenting like Christ. A parenting that involves taking up a personal cross, but one that's done with pure joy, despising the shame, a truly sacrificial love that goes beyond superficial wants and serves our children's deepest needs. They get our focused attention. They get our loving discipline. They get some of our best hours, not always and only what's left over at the end of the day when we have nothing left to give. They know what it's like to be fully present with mom and dad, and they know what it means to be invited into a life where Christ is the center of it all when the children are watching and when they're not. Is it easy? No. No, it's a run with endurance. But there is no self-help book on parenting that's going to be a better substitute than the actual walked the shores of Galilee Jesus and doing what he did. Parenting is back-breaking work. Of course it is. That's a cross we're carrying. And parenting can wound your heart and pierce your side. Of course it can. That's what happens when we die to ourselves. But truly authentic, sacrificial love, living in the light of the person of Christ, pouring ourselves out for the sake of developing disciples who see real joy in Christ, real peace in the Spirit, real patience that only comes from God, is the only way to raise up our children with Christ. And that starts by owning Christ, surrendering to Christ ourselves. This morning, if you're not in Christ, whatever parenting plan you're following, whatever husband or wife plan you're following, whatever boss plan or employee plan you're following, at best, it's the wisdom of the world. But Christ changes a person from the inside out, and he wants you. He wants to take you and make you into a better version of yourself. Actually, even better than that, a version of himself. If you'll take him on, we're here to work with you. We are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. We don't have to parent alone. We don't have to live Christian alone. We're in this together, and Christ is the head of it all.
Thank you for joining us. I hope you've been encouraged. I hope you've been enriched. And if you have any questions, any thoughts, any comments, reach out to us at prayers@wschurch.net. God bless you. Tune in next week.